In today's video, I'm going to show you how I blend multiple images to make these epic seascapes. Hello and welcome to this week's video. It is a little bit delayed. Obviously everything is a little bit hectic for everyone around the world. Of course I hope everyone is keeping really well, keeping at home, staying safe, washing those hands and just being sensible. Obviously it's a very difficult time, but it does mean that I'm not out on location, I'm not out taking photos, showing you how I would do something a little bit more visual, I suppose, for obvious reasons, but then nobody is, so here we are. But I'm hoping that I can give a good bit of information on how I took these shots, and hopefully something that either is just interesting to watch as itself or gives you some ideas of what sort of techniques you can teach yourself to then go and put into practice once we can start going outside again. But before we jump into Lightroom to take a look at the edit of my epic seascape, I wanted to talk briefly about how it was shot. So I took this image on the east coast of Scotland in a pretty fishing village called St. Monans. I'd seen this awesome zigzagging pier online and I knew that I really wanted to shoot it, and thankfully I was able to get out there just before the virus really took hold and we went into lockdown. To get the shot meant standing precariously on top of the harbour wall, getting covered in sea spray. I had my camera stabilised on a tripod and I used a Polar Pro Summit filter system with a graduated ND filter and a 6-stop ND to let me get slower shutter speeds, something that I'll discuss more shortly. I tried a variety of different compositions using manual focus and shooting in burst mode to try and capture different waves, but also to ensure that I got at least some images that were nice and sharp, as the wind was so strong and I was worried about camera shake resulting in blurry shots. With that explained, it's back to studio me. Getting seascape shots like this, you can go a number of different ways. The main thing, which often seems to differ for the most part, is the shutter speed that people like to use, because the inclination often, and I do this myself, is that you see water in a landscape, you think, okay, right, let's slow my shutter speed right down, blur that water, show off that motion, get that nice ethereal effect, and that's a good instinct to have, and that's great for a lot of coastal photography or waterfalls or basically anything where there's actually water in the scene. That can look really good. The problem is, if you take that too far, you run the risk of smoothing the water out too much, and I'll explain what I mean. So let's take a look at this shot that's on screen now, this number 245. Look around the water. We've got all this dramatic splashing going on, all this movement. I've done this at 0.4 seconds. It's slowed it enough to just give that sense of motion. It's not crisp and sharp, which I also don't want. But let's go and take a look at, I think, this shot. In fact, let's just go ahead and reset so I can just show a little bit better, develop settings, reset everything, okay, and turn the crop off. Brighten it just a little bit so it's easy to see. So this is the same shot, this exact same composition as that other one. The waves are still crashing all over the place, hence we get all this sort of white, what looks like foam. But while there very much is that nice ethereal effect, we get that ghostliness of the water in the scene, which does certainly emphasize the static zigzag nature of the pier, which I really like. For me, slowing it down to what is 5 seconds just means that the actual drama is lost. It suddenly becomes a more serene, calm scene. You don't get the sense of the waves crashing. This could be a still day, could be just a gentle breeze, very nice and stuff. And it isn't that. It wasn't. It was dramatic, and the waves were crashing up, and I was getting covered in water, and I kept having to wipe my lens down, and the wind was howling. It was a really dramatic day. And by using that faster shutter speed, you get that. Like, let's zoom in and take a look at the way that it's crashing down on the rocks here. And if we go to some other ones, we get the waves splashing up in the background. We get to see it, yeah, if we just flick through these images, you can see the way the water's moving. As I say, and then this one here, it's splashing up and over the pier, so it looks really, really cool. And this is a big pier. This is probably 6 foot at this point, so it's really, really coming up and over. I don't think I've got any in here which are at a very fast shutter speed. I got rid of quite a few before I did my imports. This is at 1/6 of a second, and you can sort of get the impression of what it would be like with an even faster shutter speed. You know, I don't like that as much. You lose, I think, some of the sense of motion. So for me, having that balance between the longer shutter speed to get the motion, but still keeping enough of the speed there to capture the drama, capture that texture in the water, for me, I think was really important. And so that's what I've done. And I think it's why shots like this, for example, look so much more dramatic and full of life than shots like this. So the shot that I actually ended up with from my first edit, I think, is this one here. And it's not going to pop into focus. There we go. It's popped. I did this as a bit of a quick edit at first. I do like this shot. I think it still needs a little bit of work, and I'm going to redo it. I think I'm going to start from scratch and just have another go. But in order to get this, I've composited multiple images together. See, the thing is with doing anything, any kind of ocean photography, shoreline photography, really anything with water, is that in order to get the right shots, you need to shoot a lot. And so we've got the nice splashes of waters coming up over the pier here. Then we've got the big waves here. We've got the exposed rock here and the water cascading on these parts. That's all really important elements that need to come together to show a really, really cool dramatic shot, but they didn't all happen in one frame that I could capture. So what I did is I went through and I found the elements in each photo that I wanted to use, and then I blended them together in Photoshop. And it's a pretty easy technique to do. So if I just have a quick look, I think, so you might notice, I think if we take a look, the rocks around here, I think are the ones that appear a little bit in this one, and this splash, this big splash up on the top corner, that's been brought over into this shot. I don't know why my computer's running so slowly, but so you can see that that's there, and I've blended these different elements. I've sort of gone through, picked out those separate parts, blended them together, and it is a great way of overall having a dramatic shot. And yeah, sure, you know, if I'd have waited long enough, you know, the water will do this. It will create this. So, and you know, obviously, I did see those. I don't feel bad about doing a composite of this sort of thing because I did take all those shots at the same point at the same time. I haven't Googled waves and I've taken some image that someone took in Hawaii and then photoshopped it into my scene and trying to claim that it's a real landscape. There will be some purists that say even going this far is too much, and to an extent I'd agree, but I am at least being upfront in this is a composite of certain elements. This isn't one single frame, and I'm not trying to claim it is. But I want to go and try and do another build-up of this same technique, and I think I'm going to do it with these shots up here because we've got some great motion. If we have a look up here, this is slightly slower again. This is 0.8 seconds, so still we're not talking really long exposures, we're not talking in the multiple seconds, but it's just enough to give that sense of sort of dreamy motion rather than perfectly crisp. So I like these. I'm not sure if I prefer this composition as a vertical or as a horizontal as we had it before. I certainly think I need to do some cropping. So I'm going to start. We've got our shots here. I've marked them up as 2 stars just so I can see them. And first of all, I am just going to adjust my crop, straighten it up. I think I'm going to do it as a 4:3 because I don't want it to be quite so tall and narrow. So I'm just going to bring that in top and bottom a little bit. and I'm going to crop in to quite an extent. I think something like that is already looking a little bit better. I mean, maybe it might work might even work well as a square crop, 1:1, if I can pull back on that a little bit. You know what? I think we might be onto something with a square. I almost never do square crops. I tend to prefer the more cinematic, often 16:9. I often do for a lot of landscapes. I like that, particularly, you know, if you don't necessarily have the strongest foreground interest, having a nice 16:9 crop means that you're cutting out a lot of dead space on the top and bottom. And I often really like the look, but I'm going to experiment. I'm going to change things up. Why not? You know, we are locked down. It is time for me to try different things. And already just looking at this as a 1:1, just without any other edits done, I already think this looks pretty cool. So yeah, I'm confident with this. Yeah, okay, I think we're onto something. So I am going to just apply that same crop. I'm going to select those develop settings, sync settings. I'm going to check none, and I'm going to check crop. I'm going to put synchronize. So hopefully, if we flick through, yeah, everything is nicely synced up. And as we flick through, you can see the way the water is moving, and you can see the elements that we know we want to bring in. If we look here, we've got these waves starting to form up here. We've got the texture down here. As we move along, this wave builds up. Definitely think we want to bring this in. I love seeing this bit of rock just peeking out of the water. It looks really, really cool. And then certainly as we get the water splashing over and draining over the sides like that, I think that looks particularly cool. So this one, certainly, I think this one I like for the water down here the most. This one I like for these waves. I don't think we need this one. Which one's this one? 34, okay. We are going to deselect those. I'm going to just take that rating down to 0, which means it's not going to appear in our filter. I like this one for this big wave, and I think I like it for that rock. This one also we don't need. Okay, so we're going with 4 images. There are 4 main base images that we're going to go and take over to Photoshop. And so I'm going to select those like that, right click, edit in, and open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, so that's brought us over into Photoshop, and we've got all our layers down here, and I'm pretty sure that we don't need to align the layers at all, because they are pretty much all in the same. You know what, I think we might just a little bit. Why not? Okay, so we go select all, edit, auto align layers. That's just going to nudge anything back into place if it needs it. It's sometimes worth doing if you're doing things like this where you're stacking things up. Certainly if you're doing if you're doing focus stacking for like product photography, it's definitely worth making sure that everything is absolutely spot on. It is important though just to make sure that Photoshop's done it right. So we're going to zoom in. That's meaningless because nothing's, of course, I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm going peculiar. Yeah, if we just turn things off, there's no movement at all. We're in a good place. Okay, so turn those off, and we're going to start off down here. This is our base layer, and I like this as our base layer because I really like what we've got going on in the water down in this. We've got nice drama, and I particularly like the water coming in around these rocks here. So I'm going to go back, and our next layer, what have we got to come in here? 2 elements. You know what? Yeah, 2 elements. I want this rock and this wave and this bit here, and I also want this splash coming over here. So the way we're going to bring that in is just by using a mask. We're just going to click add layer mask. That's going to fill it with white. We don't want to fill it with white because that's showing all of the image. What we want to do is press Command I to invert that mask, make it go black. That means that none of that image is showing. What we do then, using our brush tool, quite a big brush, and I'm going to use a higher opacity. We then paint with white to reveal that layer on top, and we know that we want to reveal where that rock is. So we're going to paint over just like this, painting these rocks, and around here where that wave was splashing in, looking super cool, super dramatic, just like that. So if we just flick that on and off, we can see the difference that's made. We've revealed this rock, we've revealed this corner here with more of the water cascading off it. And it looks really, really cool. Okay, we're off to a good start. And of course we need to then reveal this splash up here, which we liked. And keep on painting that in. You can do this with a graphics tablet if you're doing anything that involves lots of brush strokes. I do have a graphics tablet and I probably will be using it for this actually, but not quite now. Okay, so that I think is everything. If we flick that on and off, it's already looking a little bit more dramatic. We brought those elements in. If we just turn the mask on and off to reveal the whole layer, there isn't anything else that I think I really want to bring in, because I really like what we've got. I like that there's a little bit more drama in the water here, but I don't like that it's covering up this rock there. So I think I'd rather leave this so we get to see this slightly more rugged, natural rock that which this concrete pier is sitting on. Okay, next layer is this, and again we've got a few elements. Mostly though, it's this cascading water just there. So again, we're going to go add a layer mask, Command I to invert it, and then again with our brush, we are going to brush in that water as it cascades down, just like that. Let's just turn our mask off, because I think I'm also going to brush in a little bit more of the waves that this layer has got there. I think that looks really cool. I might just swap my colors, paint black, and just bring in that there, just neaten it up. I think that looks good. Turn the mask off, see if there's any other element we want to bring in. I'm going to just try, I like over here, I like this water a little bit more than I like just the big wave of this, because this just turns to a lot of nonsense really, a lot of white nothing. But I want to keep this rock in, of course. So what I'm going to do is obviously select my layer. I'm painting white. I'm just going to paint around that. And try and paint just like that, bringing in a little bit of that rock again. In fact, bringing in revealing all of that rock. Let's just zoom in, take a little look, closer look at what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to use a lower opacity. I'm just going to brush in a little bit, because we don't want that rock to be too revealed, otherwise it becomes a little bit too obvious that we've sort of done this masking. So I think that if we just flick that on and off, is looking okay. If we zoom back out, flick that layer on and off, yeah, starting to get some good stuff. I definitely like we've got more texture in this water here than that just big expansive misty white there. I think that looks a lot better. Okay, last layer then is obvious to me. We've got two, maybe three main elements that I want to bring in. Number one, of course, is this big wave crashing up here. That's really, really cool to have caught that. Very dramatic. In an ideal world, I actually might, if I could have caught that wave, and if I'd have really had a bit more time there at the time, what I'd have liked to have done in the same composition is maybe take the exact same shot at a faster shutter speed and blend in the wave with the rest of it, just so that you get a little bit more texture, because it is, the slow shutter speed has made it a little bit wispy but you know, that's totally fine. So, but the other parts of that layer that I think I want to bring in is this line of water, bit of a wave there, because I just think that looks cooler. And I'm going to try and reveal this top part of the rock there as well, because I just like how it looks that bit more. And actually, flicking that on and off, I think it hasn't aligned the layers perfectly. If I do that quickly, you can see that the pier itself does shift a little bit, but you know what? That layer, or our background layer, is not as sharp as the one on top. I think using that slow shutter speed, there's been a little bit of camera movement, and I think, yeah. So I think what we might do is paint in a lot more of this top layer. In fact, what I think we're going to do is just try painting out the bits that we don't want, which I think is going to be easier than painting in the bits that we do. So the bits that we don't want, this is now, we should have done this the other way around really now, so now we've got a lot more work to do. So I know that we don't want all the bits that we've done so far down here. We don't want this. We want to keep in those dramatic bits there. Okay. And we don't want everything on here and down here and everything up here. We want to keep all of that. And what else did we want? Is that it? It's always a case of having to just turn these on and off, having a look. But I think I like that. I know I've missed this little bit here, but I think, you know, looking at that there versus that on top, I think I prefer our top layer. Okay. I don't know about you guys, but I think we're done on actually building our image. I'm really pleased with how that's looking. I think we're onto a good thing. So much so that I'm going to go ahead and go image, sorry, no I'm not, I'm going to go layer, flatten image, and that has merged everything down into one single layer. We're no longer working with all those images on different layers, huge file sizes. We've now got our base image made up of those different elements, all combined into one shot that we can now do our edits on. Quick cut to now, because I actually had a little look at one of my a couple of the other shots I had of this scene in Lightroom, and what I've actually done is I've brought in this section of water down here. I just really like the texture, that it has more of a swirling pattern. If we just flick that on and off. This one, it's got this big patch of just white nothingy here. It doesn't really have loads going on, but I really like the textures here. So I've literally just brought that file in. If we just turn off the background, I literally just sliced it out, masked it in, and it obviously it's the exact same scene, so it fits perfectly well. So I'm really pleased with how that looks. I just think it adds a little bit more texture to that water on that side. So I'm just going to merge that down. So now we've again got a finished base layer. There's a few things that I want to do to this. I don't want to go overboard because I actually really like the shot as it is, but there's quite a bit still that I think could really lift this scene up. First of all, going to go to adjustments, and we're going to bring up a levels adjustment, and we're just going to play around with these sliders. I want to brighten it up a little bit in the midtones, bring down those a little bit, maybe even bring up that just a touch. Flick that on and off, just lifting it up a little bit, just boosting the contrast slightly. I'm going to bring up a curves. At this point, I do tend to really play around. I do not have a exact set finished image in mind, and therefore I do not have a recipe, as it were, in my head of exactly what I'm going to do at each step to get there. So what I tend to do is bring up various different adjustments, various different filter options, play around, see what works. We don't need to keep it. Everything's on a new layer, so we can always go back and get rid of it. But looking at the image, it still looks a little bit dark. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to lift that up a little bit, on and off, see what it looks like. I think we're looking good. And then I'm going to have a quick look at our color lookups, our lookup tables, our LUTs. And I want to have a look at what drop blues looks like. You know what, I don't really think that adds a whole lot. So as a good example of one we've tried to add, we can actually, you know what, let's just have a look at some of the other ones. Let's have a look at the Fuji ones. This is obviously a very, very strong effect. I don't think anyone ever really uses these at 100%. The idea is that you load it up, and then using the opacity slider, you dial the effect back. And then you can just dial it in a little bit, more and more, until you start to get the look that you want. So what I might do is just put this in at 50%, which is still a little bit more than I'd want. And I'm going to click through some of the other ones, see what sort of look we might get. You know what, don't dislike that. Certainly adds a mood. Some of these are looking okay. You know, don't dislike that at all. So I think for me, maybe between that and, no, not that one. That one, yeah, Fuji 125, and actually very similar, aren't they? I think maybe I'm going to stick with this one, but again, I'm going to tone it down. I think I'm going to keep it at about 30%. So it's just adding a little bit of that look, which I think is just enough. I'm going to try adding a cooling filter of some kind. I think maybe a cyan, but then really bring it back. Maybe just, it's all about flicking it on and off, seeing what it does. And you know what? I don't love it. I like the cyan effect, but I don't like it applying everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring its density down to 8%, because what I do like is what it's doing to the water on this side. So I'm going to, as before, keep it on. I'm going to add a, you know what, I don't even need to do that. Oops, undo, there we go. And I'm going to invert the mask so it doesn't show, and then painting with white at 80%. I'm going to paint that filter in just to where I want it on this side of the scene. This might not really work. This might just not fit with the rest of the scene, in which case that's fine. We tried and we failed. We get rid of it. No, it just looks like an image of two halves. No, I think it would have to be on everything. And I don't think I want it on everything, even if I tried to blend it in like that. I don't think. Maybe just a really little touch. Yeah, I quite like that. I like what it's doing. It's adding a little coolness, a little bit. What I'm hoping for is like a more bluey depth to that water. I want to show her this is moody ocean water. So rather than it being a sort of, and the orangey white balance we've got at the moment is going to have much more of a sort of a cool depth, which I think might be better. In all honesty, one of the other problems I am having is that in order to film this video, I've got this big old LED light overhead, and it's casting down over me, and it's making it a little difficult to see some of the subtleties in the picture. I think I'm going to have to work on my lighting setup going forwards, but for now, that's okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to create a dodge and burn layer. Now, I'd normally leave this to one of the last things I want to do, but I think I want to use this quite heavily to get the look across that I really want. So it's something that I'm going to do now, and then maybe apply other adjustments over the top. The way I do that is by creating an empty layer. I go Edit, Fill. I want to fill it with 50% gray. You then go to the blending mode, you click overlay, that hides the layer. Then if you paint with white, it lightens a part, paint with black, and it darkens a part. Very straightforward. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to start painting first of all with white with my brush, and we want to make sure we have a very low opacity and a very low flow. Otherwise it just looks ridiculous, it looks over the top. But the areas that I want to paint white, there's a few spots, but I really want to highlight some of the light areas that are already there. So particularly on a lot of the waves, the texture we've got here. As you can see, each time I paint, it really just sort of lightens up those spots. So I'm painting around here, painting on here. I'm going to use a smaller brush. And just hitting the frothy little crests of the wave. Not too much on everywhere, just picking out certain spots. And again, on this cascade, I want to bring that out. So you don't want to use a big brush and just paint over everything. You want to keep that contrast by just using it to emphasize the light areas that are already there. I think that's already looking, if we just flip it on and off, it's really bringing that out. It's standing out so much more, it's looking great. We're going to do the same on this bit. Bring it out on these rocks, a little bit on here. And we're going to do the same on these waves in the background, just helping those stand out a little more. Okay, if we zoom out and flick that on and off, we can see it's just made a huge amount of difference in carving out the details on that water. It adds so much drama, everything just pops out a little bit more. But we're not done with painting in with our light, because I do want to do the same with a larger brush on the pier itself. I want that to be cut out a lot more than it currently is, because it needs to, it's already catching the light. This isn't adding in light where there wasn't any before. It's just emphasizing a little bit and just allowing it to pop off the page that bit more. I think that's looking good. Then same brush tool, swap our colors. You paint with black to darken it, and we want to go around and basically do the opposite. Instead of highlighting where it's light, we want to highlight some of those dark areas of the water. Certainly around here, this bit of the wave. Again, it's emphasizing that depth of the ocean, that dark moodiness, deepening those colors, deepening those tones. So if we flick that on and off, it's very, very clear the difference that that has made. So much so, in fact, that I am going to tone it down a little bit. I'm going to bring that down to maybe, I think maybe 60%. I think I've gone a little bit overboard but it does need it. It really does help lift it out. It helps carve out those textures. It turns it into such a more dramatic scene. It's got almost like a painterly sort of look. You could imagine this almost, you know, being like an oil painting of a seascape or something, which I really like. I think that's a great look. So I'm really pleased. The next thing I want to do is use the camera raw filter, but in order to do that I need to combine all my layers. I'm going to hold down Alt, I'm going to go layer, merge visible. That merges everything now onto one new layer above everything else. So we can still go back and edit those layers if we want, but it's just giving us a clean starting point for me to go filter, camera raw filter. This then is bringing up all of the same tools that you would have in Lightroom, including my my presets, because I do want to have a little flick through those presets, see if it gives us any inspiration for color toning, because there's a lot of things said about using Lightroom presets, and I think a lot of it is not particularly justified. I think if you are the sort of person that wants to just buy a preset and just click and apply it and have a color, that's fine. You know, you might not want to go through all that effort in trying to do this if you know that there's a look in mind that you want to do. But the way I particularly like to use them is not that I just want to do one click and there's my finished image, but I like to go through the presets that I do have just to get that inspiration. Like, you can literally just go and flick through them now and see all these different patterns and tones and colors, maybe even black and white, because this does work very, very well as a black and white image as well. And you might just get an idea of something that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily have had, but you only get that by actually going through and looking at them. And I've got various Visco, what's he like that? I think that looks really cool. Which one's that? F1 Raw. Yeah, I think that looks really, really, really cool. We're going to start at the top and just go through and see what happens to our color toning. And, you know, things like this, I don't like at all. That again is very brown. It's almost like a sepia toning. I'm not keen on that. These blue tones though, I do like a lot. That looks pretty cool to me. This also looks pretty nice. So yeah, there's a whole variety. Ooh, that looks particularly good. And if you just sort of move the cursor away, on and off, you can see what it's doing to your shot. I actually like a lot of these. And as I say, I really liked that. I liked F2. Yeah, he looked good. Maybe a little bit too much, but it's just great to just go through and, well, that looks nice as well. Wow, lots of options. Okay. Yeah. I think I mentioned this is the Visco presets, VSCO. Presets for Lightroom. I've got a whole bunch and I really, really do like them. But I'll show you how I use them. I have shown this in other videos, but if this is the first one you've seen of mine, then it's probably good for me to give you a good overview of exactly how I would go about using presets in my workflow. That might be my favorite. It's actually not doing a lot to the colors. It's really just sort of lightening, upping the contrast a little bit on that. No, okay, I think we're going to go back to, I think, A8 Raw. I'm going to apply that, I'm going to press OK. But crucially, I'm not just going to apply it and leave it and that's it, that's everything done. I'm going to tone it back a little bit because we don't want it all applying like that. I'm going to keep it maybe 60% actually. I'm also going to apply a mask and I'm going to paint black and I'm going to just start painting out some of where it's applying on top of the pier itself, because it was taking out a little bit too much of that orange tone on there, and I like having that in here. I think it looks good. So it's applying around the pier. It's adding more of that nice blue tone to the water that I tried to get before. It's taking out a little bit of the orange of the sky, which I like. So yeah, I think that looks really good. So yeah, I think that looks good. I'm going to do exactly the same thing again now. Hold down Alt, Layer, Merge Visible onto another new layer. And we're going to go and do the same again. We're going to open up Camera Raw filter. But this time, I'm actually just going to play with some of the actual regular exposure sliders, because we haven't done that at all yet. This image otherwise is pretty much straight out of camera. I do want to bring those highlights down. Not too much, because we don't want to, again, kill all of the contrast. But speaking of which, I am going to bring the contrast down, because it's a little bit too crisp and punchy, and so I want to bring that down, the contrast down, but then I'm going to bring the shadows up to +10, and I'm going to up the dehaze. Now if you go overboard on this and things start looking too punchy and crunchy, but I do like what it does to the color, so I'm going to bring it up to quite a bit, +30. But crucially, by bringing the contrast up and down, you can see that it's, if we have the contrast at 0, it's too much. There's too much contrast going on. But by bringing it down, maybe somewhere around there, looks good. And again, playing with those shadows, keeping that shadow detail in there, you get to balance everything out. If you use, and again, saying if you did the same thing with clarity, I am going to add clarity, but I'm not going to add it now, because I just want to add it to bits of the scene. The thing to do is to play around with these sliders, basically dehaze, clarity, and contrast and shadows. Like, they all basically add contrast in different ways. So if you use one by adding it, you could try taking it away somewhere else and seeing how those two different elements play together. Because I do that a lot with the vibrance and saturation. One of the things I do most often to get drama in a scene is to reduce the vibrance, but then boost the saturation, sometimes by quite a lot, which I think is going to work well here, because that's going to give back that depth of like the emerald green in the water. So I think that's looking pretty good. As I say, not adding any clarity at this point. I might just see what adding some whites does. I do like that a bit. Okay, I'm going to add just a little touch. Okay, next thing then, HSL adjustments, hue, saturation, luminance. This is where you can edit colors individually, and I think I want to play with the hue of the yellow a little bit, moving up and down, seeing what that's doing. I think down there is good. Orange. Orange I'm going to move up a little bit, but I'm also going to bring its saturation down. Not all the way, because things start getting a little bit weird, but I just want to take the edge out. That sky is very colourful. We've got a nice orange over here, but it sort of then blends to this blue, which is nice, but I kind of feel that it's a nice looking sunset sky, which almost takes you out of the drama of the moody water we've got lower down in the scene. So I'm going to bring the saturation down. I'm also going to bring the luminance up, which is going to also help reduce the saturation there. Right, let's take a look at these blues, because if we drop the blue, it goes to a little bit too much of a cyan tone, particularly in the sky. It doesn't look very good. So I'm going to drop it a little bit. I'm going to go to -15. What about the aquas? Because there's a lot of aqua tone in here. But I don't want to take that down. I want to push that up, away from the greens, into the blues. And with the luminance, we're going to do the same again. Move them up and down. I think with the aquas, it's actually looking quite good to bring those down. -30. The blues, however, I think, actually, you know what, the same. I'm going to bring the blues down too. Yeah, I like that. Okay, what about the hues of the purple and magenta? I'm not sure if we've got loads of purple and magenta. I think the only place I can see it is very subtly in these clouds here. And I don't want it to be in any way purple, so I'm going to bring that all the way down to the blue. Magenta. I don't think that's doing anything at all. We can leave that there. That then, I think, is everything that I want to do in HSL. We could have a look at the camera calibration tool and see what that might be doing to our image if we move these around. I'm not sure I like what it's doing. If I bring it down here, I like what it's doing to the water. I don't like what it's doing to the sky. The sky's gone pink, it looks ridiculous. And if we move it that way, it goes green, it looks ridiculous. Moving this around. And that up. Okay. So I think that looks good. I think that's pretty much what I'm happy with. I'm going to have a look at what it looks like to add in a graduated filter just to bring down the brightness of the sky. But crucially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and emphasize it more over this corner because it's much brighter this side than it is on this side. And I want to try and balance it out a little bit. I'm just going to try bringing that exposure down. Maybe twisting it a little bit more. Maybe bringing the temperature down slightly. I'm not trying to get it to perfectly match. I do like that it's got different tones, but to me it just stood out a little bit too much as being this big patch of orange in the sky when the rest of the scene is very much about those muted blue tones. So I think this might just be enough just to help take that edge off. Okay. And then I'm going to add a new one. Oops. I'm going to bring it down here. I'm going to reset that exposure. Reset those shadows. And I'm just going to see what it looks like to up the clarity a little bit. Just make those clouds pop. And I'm going to bring down the dehaze. And I'm going to press OK. And if we just flick that on and off, you can see it's made a big difference in controlling this big highlight without that layer. This I found, so this is all down to, as everything is in photography, very much down to personal preference. To me, this big patch of brightness up here was distracting. It could be nice, you could lean into it, even put like a flare or emphasize it in some way to really make it stand out of the scene, but I want the eye to be drawn more to the waves, the rocks down here, the way the water is crashing around. That's what I want to be the focus of the scene, and having this, I think, just draws the eye away from that. So toning it down, it's making the image much more balanced. But this, I think, is putting us in a very, very, very good place. I really like what we've got. If we just go back and turn everything off and have a look at our image by itself, if I press the right button, it's a nice base image, but it's very, very flat. It's quite lifeless, and the tones don't look great. Then here's what we brought in: so much more detail coming out in the waves, so much more life to it. The big crashing wave up here looks great. I think the color toning looks better. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how this is looking. And we could leave it there, but I am just going to keep on having a little bit more of a play, see if there's anything else that I can do with this just to change it up that little bit. So duplicated the layer and come back into the camera raw filter. I want to have another look at seeing what it's like to layer over some more presets, because that's one of the things, again, that I think is a really great way of using them, is not just to use one, but to apply one, bring that opacity down, duplicate that layer, and then add other ones. And you can build them up and up and up, so you get completely original tones, but you've built it up by using these presets in a different way, which is a great way of ensuring that the way you use one preset is going to be completely different to the way that someone else might use the same preset. Some of the noises that I just might make while I'm trying to decide. I mean, I really like this. We used this already, but putting it again over the top, I think could look good. I think this is a really beautiful tone. So much so that I'm going to use it. But I'm going to bring it down, as I say. We don't want all of it. So I'm going to start by bringing it up and up, up. I think 50%. I think that's where I want it to be. I'm going to merge it down into this layer, duplicate that layer, back into Camera Raw Filter, and then back over into our presets. And we're going to start doing it again. That actually looks really nice as well. It really works as black and white, you guys. I think it really works as a black and white. I'm going to apply this one, and then I'm going to turn it down again because we don't want it. We want to have that blend. We've got the blue underneath from the previous filter preset, sorry. And then we bring in this other tone on top, which blends them together. And I think having both of them at 50%, I think works really well. But what I am going to do is add a mask, and I'm going to mask out, erase some of it on the water because it's bringing in some orangey tones to our water in the waves that you can just see in some of the highlights on the waves that we don't want. We've managed to get this really, really rich watery tone that I don't want, but I do like how it looks in the concrete, and I like how it looks in the sky, and I like how it looks in the water on this side of the pier. It's really an image of two halves because obviously this is a wave barrier, is an ocean barrier, which means that one side of it, it's super rough and all the waves are crashing against it like mad. Other side, tranquil. Ducklings could sail across it. Sail, swim. They're ducks. What, maybe I might start saying that ducks sail from now on. I actually quite like that as terminology. Yeah, so I think this is looking pretty good. There's really not a lot else that I think I want to do, because the more I do, the more likely we're going to get into, I think, just going overboard, spoiling our image. The one last thing I'm going to try, this might not work, because we did our dodge and burn layer, and that's now deep down here below these other layers. And so if I just bring that, drag and drop over the top, it's going to apply those same dodge and burn effects again on top of what we've already got. It's going to be overkill. It's definitely overkill, but I don't hate what it's doing. But I want to bring it in just a little bit, just a hint to carve out those details a bit more. 20%, maybe even a little less, 17, on and off. It's just a touch, particularly on top of here. It's just, I wonder if we could stand to go a little bit more. Maybe 23. Yeah. 30 even. Yeah, 30 is a sweet spot, no more. I might be pushing it even then. Might bring it back. 25. Yeah, okay, I think that looks really, really neat. I think that looks good. That is, I think, everything I want to do in Photoshop. I think it is. So at this point, I'm really happy with the scene I've got. I'm going to flatten my image because it's many layers deep now. My file size is big and my computer is struggling. So flattening your image does mean you can't go back and edit those previous layers, but it does, at least if you think you've got to a really safe point, it's going to give your computer a much easier time moving forwards. It's already struggling and it won't let me do any adjustments. Something's not right. So I think that is everything that I want to do in Photoshop. So I'm going to press Command S. It's going to save it. And I'm going to reload Lightroom. And then that's brought us back into Lightroom. There's a couple of other things that we do need to do to this. We need to fix our crop, because obviously after we had done our layer alignment, it had knocked some of the layers out of place. So we're going to go in and we're going to do 1 to 1. I'm just going to bring it in, and press OK. There we go, no more terrible outlines. And I'm just going to try and have another look. I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to bring up a little adjustment brush, reset everything, but I'm going to bring the saturation down, and I'm going to paint that in on top of that rock. I'm not going to go all the way. If you do it all the way down, it's going to look weird, but it's just enough. Halfway, a little bit less, because without it I just kind of felt it looked a little bit unnaturally blue, and I didn't love that. And you know what, I think I might feel the same way about some of that. A little bit less there. It's made very little difference, but I know it's there, and that makes me happy. I'm also going to bring in another graduated filter. It's going to be darker, and I just want to use it to darken down this corner, because we've got this big space of concrete that isn't really adding anything. If anything, I think it's taking away from the rest of our scene. So I'm going to bring in, oops. Dear me. I'm going to bring in this filter, not too much, just a little bit, darken it down. And that's just really showing that there's nothing here. It's darkening it down. Your eye isn't going to be drawn to it. Without it, then you see all the detail in these rocks, and it's very easy for the eye to be drawn down there. It just helps focus the attention more on the middle of a scene, which is exactly what we want. Taking a look at my crop again, I'm actually going to bring it in. I'm going to bring it in on both sides to about there, I think, just to make it more even with the edges of the frame. I think that's a better crop. I'm going to check that it's definitely straight, which it is now. It's probably too late to add my profile corrections, but I'll take them anyway. There's no noise or sharpening applied. That's good. We don't want that. And I'm just going to have one last play with some of these sliders. I'm going to take that -10. And then I'm going to have another play. I'm going to see what it's like bringing that contrast down, because I don't want it to be a contrasty scene. It's grungy and it's too much. And although it is a very moody scene, I want it to have that slightly more matte, painterly feel to it. So I'm going to bring the contrast down to -20 or -19. I'm going to drop the blacks by -5. I'm going to slightly up my shadows, slightly, plus that. My highlights. I'm going to leave where they are because I like it on there, but I am going to bring in a radial adjustment up here, feathered as much as possible. Oops, invert it. And I'm going to bring the highlights down just in this area to about there, which again is just helping bring down that really bright patch, draw the eye more to the middle of the scene. I don't think there's anything more that I want to do with that. I'm really pleased with that shot overall. I like the colors in it. I love the drama, and we've come a long way. If we just bring up our original images. Cannot remember where they are anymore. They're in here. And we'll select 2 stars, so we see only our 2-star images. So if we take a look at this one, our original straight out of camera raw shot, and then we take a look at what we've done with it, it's a huge difference. It really looks great. So much more drama. The waves, by combining those different elements, we've got this spray here that's in there. We've got the nice waves coming over this side. We've got the big splashes going on, the big wave here, and we've brought in multiple different elements, all of which lend so much more drama and life to this shot. I do hope that's been really helpful edit. I think this is probably going to be quite a long video. I've intentionally made it quite long because A, I haven't done one in a while, and B, from what I've been reading online, people haven't got a lot of things to do, and I thought, well, I'm not strapped for time, people at home aren't strapped for time, I'm not going to try and keep this to 15 minutes, I'm going to waffle on endlessly. But I'm pleased with the shot. I'd really like to know what you think about it. I'm hoping that these are good techniques for you to think about if you are going shooting seascapes, that it's really worth shooting lots of images when you're doing these, because you don't know where the waves are going to be. You might get a really great crashing wave, you might get a certain swirling pattern in there which you don't get on other ones. It's worth shooting a lot, and you can then blend them using these techniques in Photoshop to end up with a finished image that you're really pleased with. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you have watched this far, you must be very bored if you've watched all of this video. If you have liked this, then do please hit the like button, subscribe if you don't already, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this video. I'd love to know whether you would have done anything differently, what else you'd have liked to have seen. So do please leave those comments in the box below, and I will see you next time.